At the larger level, I suppose we should all ask ourselves, although we have practical work that needs to be done now, but we also should spend our time, and especially you as students or practitioners of the law and particularly constitutional law, we do need to think a little bit about how we got here, how we got to this point, because I myself am trying to trying to think about how much of it was an existing condition of America, how much of these things that we've seen rise up to the point of threatening our democracy, how much of those were just baked into the system and had been there just waiting for the spark, and how much of it was the unique qualities of Trump. And I think, as always in history, you're not going to get a definitive answer. There were, for instance, if you look at historical examples, there were alternatives to Adolf Hitler in Germany. There were people like Gustav Stresemann, who was the foreign minister for many years of the Weimar Republic. His goals were not unlike Hitler's, and most Germans' goals were very similar to Hitler's, but Hitler turned out to be special. Stresemann attempted to achieve those goals within existing liberal system. Hitler's goal was to overthrow that liberal system, so it mattered that it was Hitler. Uh, you could say the same thing about Mussolini. Yes, there was the bitterness after World War I that Mussolini was able to take advantage of. There was the fear of communism among Italian middle and upper classes that he was able to pick on. But Mussolini himself was also special. So it's a complicated equation to try to get right. How much of it was Trump and how much of it was us? And my view is that Trump was and is a decisive factor because of the nature of his personality. In a way, because I believe his personality defect, which is his unbelievable and probably clinical narcissism, actually has made him an effective, charismatic leader of angry people, in a way that other pretenders to that position failed. We could have had Ted Cruz at the head of this movement, and we know as much as we know everything we need to know about Ted Cruz, but he's not Donald Trump. And by the way, because he's not Donald Trump, he never developed the following that Donald Trump has. In fact, Donald Trump destroyed him as he destroyed everybody else in the primaries. But I could imagine any number of other leaders. My hope would be that the movement, the Republican base that is now almost entirely devoted to Trump, would split among different pretenders. Some go to Josh Hawley, some go to Tom Cotton, some go to Tucker Carlson, some go to DeSantis, right? But that has not yet happened. And Trump, as I say, is still the dominant force in the party. And again, I just think that while the kindling was there, the underlying attitudes were there, the tribalism was there, the racism was there, the resentments were there, but it really did take someone like Trump to turn that into something that could be a real threat to our democracy. Now, that's purely theoretical, and it doesn't matter at all because Trump is going to be the Republican nominee unless something very strange happens, which means we are going to be up against this threat in the years ahead. What can we do about it? Well, as I say, we've already not done the things that we all agreed who were worried about this all agreed needed to be done. Those things have not been done. How do we win now? How do we prevent him from getting into office now? I really do think that is unfortunately going to require that all of us as individuals be deeply engaged in the political struggles in our communities, in our states, and in our nation in a way that we are not used to doing anymore. There's no question that the organized Trump movement has been operating at a local level with much greater organization and intensity than those who would oppose them. And I don't think we can expect that if no one opposes them with equal intensity, that they're not going to be successful. And there were so many issues on which so many Americans are willing to countenance the undemocratic behavior of Trump and others in the Republican Party because they agree with them on mask mandates, you know, or because they agree with them on, if they even understood what critical race theory meant, they think they agree about it, right? So, and to me, this is the saddest part of this whole story about America. I mean, the thing, it never surprised me that people had grievances, but my feeling was always, whatever the question is, the answer is not Donald Trump. And yet people do believe the answer is Donald Trump. And that just, to me, says that a very, very large, substantial number of Americans do not really value universal right. And I must say that is kind of where I am right now, that the founders created a system which was unlike any other system in history, and it's really worth remembering what a true, and to use the phrase of what's his name? Never mind. Anyway, it was a true radical revolution. Gordon Wood, thank you. That it really was a radical revolution, and it was a radical revolution in the way that it dealt with the question of rights. Because, the observation that Frank Fukuyama, borrowing from Hegel, borrowing from Kojève, etc., made, that what people want is recognition of their dignity, of their individuality. People want that. And that is somehow the root of democracy. I don't think that's right. People do want that for themselves. They want to be recognized. They want their identity to take it seriously. They want to be treated as individuals deserving of respect. But do they care whether anybody else who is not like them is also treated that way? And that's the true meaning of liberalism, that you're expanding individual rights for everybody. It's easy for you to say, I've got mine, and that's what I want. The hard part is saying, not only do they have to get theirs, but part of them getting theirs is going to come out of mine. And, but that is the republic that the founders created, and that is what they relied on. And the question that I sometimes have is, did they create a system that was too good for Americans, or maybe too good for humans? In the sense that humans' tribalism is so deeply, almost genetically wired that it's very difficult to overcome, and that no other experiment in history has really attempted to overcome it. If you compare Americans at the American universal attitude toward rights compared to English right, English also believed in rights, but they believed it for English people. I mean, one of the reasons that we had to have a revolution, and the one reason we had a Declaration of Independence, and one reason that we turned to universal rights, I don't know why I'm saying we, these were other people doing this hundreds of years ago, but the founders, was because they needed to say that they had these individual rights regardless of their English heritage, that the rights were inherent in their humanity, not in their Englishness. And that is what this country has been based on, but it's unclear how many Americans actually ever really bought into it. Certainly for white Americans, as long as they were on top, they were okay with it. But the minute that the expansion of rights began to cut into their privileged position, that was when they were no longer interested in universal rights. That's a very broad statement. It's not true of all, obviously, but that is, to some extent, the explanation for this trend that we've seen in recent years. So, and I could go on, but I won't here because I want to leave enough time for our discussion. But there are real questions about how deeply committed Americans are to these principles. Again, my hope would be that, as has happened in the past, maybe an international conflict, which is being portrayed, I think, legitimately as among other things, a struggle between democracy and autocracy, may remind Americans that, yeah, we're supposed to be for the democracy part of that. It has had that, these kinds of crises have had that effect on the United States in the past. If you look at America circa 1936, 1937, America was in pretty bad shape then, not just because of the Depression, but because of political divisions, because of rampant racism, anti-Semitism, anti-immigration sentiment, economic isolationism, as well as political isolationism, and really, a very large segment of the population not feeling that Hitler was such a problem, but really feeling that maybe Hitler was the answer to communism, which is what they were really afraid of. So we've been in places like this before, and World War II basically flattened the alternate argument for quite some time. And I would say, if you the literature, historical literature suggests that at least some element of the civil rights movement got a boost from the Cold War competition, insofar as Americans felt like, well, maybe we actually do have to start practicing more democracy at home if we're going to claim to be the leader of the free world, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to overdo how much that played a role, but it did play some role. And so, as I say, maybe getting back to my more optimistic and enthusiastic self, maybe the fact that we are now in a crisis that is understood to be a crisis of democracy in general, and because there's been this enormous international outpouring on behalf not just of the Ukrainian people, but I think on behalf of the principles of liberalism, that maybe this will have some blowback, positive blowback effect in the United States. But what I can say is that that will be fortuitous if true, but it will not be on the basis of anything that we have done. And I wish that we would now start taking some responsibility for saving our own democracy, which I do believe is still very much at risk.